For 3 decades, Wendy Williams walked into studios and did something most media personalities were afraid to do. She spoke the truth loudly, directly, and without apology. Millions tuned in every morning, not because she was polished, but because she was fearless. She said the things other hosts only whispered. Before long, she became the most talked-about woman in daytime television. Her star landed on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Her voice earned a place in the Radio Hall of Fame. She built an empire on gossip, bold opinions, and an honesty that made powerful people extremely uncomfortable. Then suddenly, the loudest woman in the room went silent. It wasn't retirement. It wasn't a graceful goodbye. It was a chain of events so shocking that it felt almost unreal. The woman who built her career exposing other people's secrets suddenly found herself losing her own voice, her freedom, and control over the spotlight she fought so hard to earn. How does someone rise that high and still end up fighting for something as basic as independence? To understand what happened to Wendy Williams, you have to go back to the beginning. Wendy. Joan Williams was born on July 18, 1964, in Asbury Park, New Jersey. It was a lively shore town where everyone seemed to know everyone, and standing out could either make you famous or make life difficult. She was the second of 3 children raised by Thomas and Shirley Williams, 2 educators who valued discipline, structure, and academic success. Her father made history in 1969 when he became the first black school administrator in Red Bank, New Jersey. Her mother worked as a special education teacher known for her patience and dedication. Their home valued achievement. Books filled the shelves, expectations were high, and success was never treated as optional. But even in strong households, pressure can grow quietly. For Wendy, that pressure showed up early. By 6th grade, she was already 5 feet 7 inches tall and wore a size 11 shoe. In a world with narrow expectations about how girls should look and behave, Wendy didn't fit the mold. She was loud when people expected quiet. She had huge energy when others expected restraint. Her parents worried about her weight and placed her on a strict diet while she was still young. The intention may have been concern for her health, but emotionally, the experience stayed with her. Years later, Wendy spoke openly about feeling judged during those years. Long before she questioned celebrities on television, she had already spent her childhood feeling like she was constantly being measured. Her sister Wanda seemed to represent academic perfection. She earned straight A's and entered Tufts University at just 16 years old. Watching that kind of success from close range made Wendy feel like she had to find a different path. Wendy had endless energy. Doctors even suggested medication to calm her down at one point. She tried everything to focus that energy: marching band, swimming, volunteering, and even announcing baseball games for her younger brother's Little League team. But one thing captured her attention more than anything else: the radio. Late at night, Wendy would lie in her room listening to New York City radio stations. The DJs fascinated her. Their voices could hold the attention of an entire city. That power stayed with her. One day she decided she would be that voice. In the early 1980s, she enrolled at Northeastern University in Boston to study communications. At the campus radio station WRBB, she finally stepped behind a microphone. It didn't take long for people to notice something different. Other students sounded formal and cautious. Wendy sounded natural. She spoke like she was talking directly to listeners instead of performing for them. Her voice felt real. She graduated in 1986 with a communications degree and a clear goal: radio stardom. But the media world of the 1980s wasn't quick to welcome bold personalities, especially outspoken black women with strong opinions. Opportunities came slowly. Her first break came far from the big markets she dreamed about. She worked at a station in St. Croix, in the U.S. Virgin Islands. The audience was smaller, but the experience was priceless. There she learned the rhythm of radio: timing, pacing, personality, and how to keep listeners hooked using only her voice. Eventually, she returned to the mainland, working at WOL in Washington, D.C. before finally moving toward the biggest stage she wanted to conquer: New York City. By the late 1980s, Wendy joined 98.7 KISS FM as a fill-in DJ. She fought hard for every shift and every minute on air. When she got the microphone, she used it differently. Other hosts played music and moved on. Wendy stayed in the conversation. She discussed celebrities the same way people talked about them at home, with honesty and curiosity. She asked uncomfortable questions. She repeated rumors record labels wanted buried. Listeners loved it. Inside the music industry, though, her style made people nervous. Artists sitting across from her never knew what she might ask next. Some appreciated the honesty, others walked out of interviews. One exchange with Whitney Houston became legendary. The tension between them was obvious, and listeners could feel it through the radio. The moment wasn't polite, but it was unforgettable. That was Wendy's formula. Honesty over comfort. But honesty came with consequences. In 1998, she was fired from Hot 97, the station that dominated New York hip-hop culture. The official reasons were never fully explained, but many believed she had pushed too far. Radio stations relied on relationships with record labels and artists. A host who constantly upset those relationships could eventually become a liability, and Wendy had become a very big one. Suddenly, the most talked-about voice in New York radio was off the air. For a moment, it looked like everything might collapse. Then Philadelphia offered her a fresh start at WSL Power 99 FM. Wendy rebuilt her audience there quickly. Even when she tried to soften her style, she was still louder and more fearless than most hosts. Philadelphia listeners loved her authenticity, but New York was always the destination. In 2001, she returned with a nationally syndicated afternoon show called The Wendy Williams Experience on WBLS. This time, she didn't return as a rising talent. She returned as a force. The show spread across multiple markets and became a cultural phenomenon. Fans didn't just listen casually, they organized their afternoons around it. Wendy had built a level of connection most broadcasters spend entire careers trying to achieve. Her success reached new heights. In 2009, she was inducted into the Radio Hall of Fame. In 2014, her hometown of Asbury Park renamed the street where she grew up Wendy Williams Way. But behind that success, her private life was becoming complicated. During the 1990s, Wendy had struggled with cocaine addiction, something she later admitted openly. Around that same period, she met Kevin Hunter at a skating rink in 1994. He wasn't part of the media world. He had run a beauty salon and knew little about broadcasting, but he became her partner. Over time, his role grew larger. He became her manager, business partner, and eventually executive producer. People working around them often described a dynamic where Kevin had enormous control over the business side of Wendy's empire. His approval was required for many major decisions. Warning signs appeared early. In 2008, a former employee filed a lawsuit accusing Hunter of creating a hostile work environment. The case was eventually settled outside of court, and the details faded from public attention. Wendy rarely spoke about the situation publicly. Instead, she defended her marriage whenever rumors appeared. At the same time, her career was reaching another level. In 2008, The Wendy Williams Show launched on television in several test markets. The response was immediate. Within a year, it expanded into national syndication. Wendy had officially transitioned from radio star to television powerhouse. At its peak, the show attracted around 2.4 million viewers every day. She competed for the top position among female daytime hosts, often going head-to-head with Ellen DeGeneres. Her wigs became iconic. Her celebrity interviews were unpredictable. And her catchphrase, "How you doing?" became a cultural phrase recognized everywhere. But behind the bright studio lights, the pressure was growing. Her marriage was quietly deteriorating. Her health was becoming harder to ignore, and the same body that had carried her through decades of performing was beginning to send warnings. In February 2018, those warnings became impossible to hide. During a live Halloween episode, Wendy suddenly fainted on stage while dressed as the Statue of Liberty. The audience gasped as she collapsed in front of the cameras. It wasn't scripted. It was real. Her team rushed to help while the broadcast quickly cut away. Eventually, Wendy recovered and even returned to finish the show, joking about the incident afterward. But the moment was a signal. For years, Wendy had been dealing with Graves' disease, an autoimmune condition affecting the thyroid. The illness causes severe fatigue, weight changes, and intense stress on the body. She had managed it quietly while continuing to work, but now the cracks were becoming visible. At the same time, rumors about Kevin Hunter's long-term relationship with another woman had circulated for years in tabloids. Wendy repeatedly defended him publicly, even holding up her wedding ring during broadcasts when the topic came up. Then in 2019, everything exploded. The woman rumored to be involved with Hunter gave birth to a child. After years of denial, the truth could no longer be ignored. The life Wendy had spent decades building began collapsing in a matter of weeks. In April 2019, after 20 years of marriage, Wendy Williams filed for divorce. Those close to her said the moment was devastating. It wasn't just the end of a relationship. It was the collapse of the entire system that had surrounded her career and personal life for years. For the first time in decades, the woman who had spent her career analyzing everyone else's drama was forced to confront her own story in public. Kevin Hunter wasn't just Wendy Williams' husband. He had become her manager, her executive producer, her business partner, and the man tied to almost every part of the empire she built. So when their marriage collapsed, it wasn't simply a divorce. It meant dismantling a professional structure that had been built around both of them for decades. Ending the relationship meant rebuilding her entire operation while the cameras were still rolling, and she did it anyway. Wendy returned to her show and sat back in the chair that had made her famous. When she spoke to her audience about the divorce, the studio fell unusually quiet. She didn't share every detail, and she didn't turn it into a dramatic confession. But she was honest enough that everyone watching could feel the weight of what had happened. That day, she wasn't performing strength. She was showing it. But strength comes with a cost. For years, Wendy had been open about her past cocaine addiction. She talked about it publicly and treated it as part of her story instead of hiding it in shame. But addiction rarely disappears forever. It waits. It hides in the background and looks for moments of weakness. And the spring of 2019 created exactly that kind of moment. The betrayal, the divorce, and the public humiliation of a woman who had spent her entire career discussing other people's scandals suddenly becoming the headline herself. That kind of pressure can break people. Wendy chose to fight. She checked herself into a sober living facility and told her audience directly during her show. She explained it in the same blunt tone she always used when delivering difficult news. She was getting help. She was focusing on herself, and she was determined to be okay. The show continued through 2019 and into 2020. Her divorce was finalized and staying sober became a daily battle. Through all of it, her son Kevin Hunter Jr. remained her biggest source of motivation. He was the reason she kept showing up, the reason she stayed in that chair even when everything around her felt like it was falling apart. But the human body keeps its own record of stress. Wendy had already been dealing with Graves' disease, a serious autoimmune disorder affecting the thyroid. Around the same time, she was also diagnosed with lymphedema, a chronic condition that causes painful swelling in the legs and feet. Photos from that period showed how difficult things had become. Moving sometimes required careful effort. On certain days, she used a mobility scooter to get around. And true to her personality, she addressed the condition openly before anyone else could turn it into gossip. She spoke about it with the same blunt honesty that had always defined her career. But the weight she was carrying was no longer just physical. People close to Wendy began noticing subtle changes that were harder to explain. Sometimes she struggled to find the right word during conversations. Occasionally, there were pauses where there had never been pauses before. For someone known for speaking faster and sharper than almost anyone in media, those small moments stood out. It wasn't dramatic at first, just slight hesitation. Most people assumed it was exhaustion. After all, the past few years had been overwhelming. Divorce, health problems, and the stress of maintaining a daily television show could wear down anyone. But something deeper was quietly developing. In 2021, Wendy Williams took a leave of absence from The Wendy Williams Show, citing ongoing health complications. Guest hosts stepped in while the audience waited. The network waited too. They had seen Wendy disappear temporarily before and return stronger than ever. Everyone expected that to happen again, but this time was different. She never came back. In 2022, it was officially announced that television host Sherri Shepherd would take over the time slot with her own show. After 13 seasons, The Wendy Williams Show ended quietly. There was no final episode, no farewell speech, no emotional goodbye from the woman who had built the show from the ground up. The set remained the same. The famous purple chair stayed in place, but Wendy Williams was gone. For someone whose entire career had been built on using her voice, the silence felt strange. Because Wendy Williams had always believed in one rule: the truth should never stay quiet. For 30 years, she walked into studios and filled them with conversation, debate, gossip, and fearless honesty. Her voice had made millions of people feel entertained, heard, and connected. Which is why what happened next felt especially cruel. Because the one thing she had fought her entire life to own, her voice, was suddenly being questioned. In 2022, Wells Fargo filed a petition in a New York court asking for Wendy Williams to be placed under financial guardianship. The bank claimed she might be vulnerable to financial exploitation and unable to manage her accounts safely. The request shocked many people. Wendy publicly pushed back. She insisted she was capable of managing her own life and finances. She reminded everyone that she was a college-educated woman who had built a global media career and managed major decisions for decades. But the court made a different decision. A financial guardian was appointed, attorney Sabrina Morrissey, who was given authority over Wendy's financial matters and eventually influence over health-related decisions as well. Soon, Wendy was moved into a luxury memory care facility in New York called the Coterie in Hudson Yards, where care reportedly cost around $25,000 per month. Life there came with strict rules. Her daily movements required approval. Leaving the building required permission. For someone who had once traveled the country hosting shows, filling arenas, and commanding television networks, the change was dramatic. Wendy spoke openly about how she felt. She called the facility a dump and told people she didn't believe she belonged there. She argued that the memory care floor was meant for patients with severe cognitive decline and insisted she was still mentally present. The public watched the situation with confusion and concern. Some believed she was being protected. Others believed she was being controlled. Then in February 2024, the truth about her medical condition finally became public. Wendy Williams was diagnosed with primary progressive aphasia and frontotemporal dementia, the same group of neurological conditions that had affected actor Bruce Willis. The announcement came through a carefully written statement from her medical team. For many fans, the news explained the subtle changes people had noticed for years. The pauses, the difficulty with words, the quiet moments from someone who had built a legendary career speaking louder and faster than almost anyone else in the room. The diagnosis had actually been confirmed in 2023 after extensive testing at Weill Cornell Medicine. According to her team, deciding to reveal it publicly was not easy. But eventually they believed it was necessary, not just for Wendy, but for others facing the same invisible battle. The condition was primary progressive aphasia. It attacks the brain's language centers. Slowly, it begins to erode a person's ability to speak, read, write, and even understand conversations. At first, the changes are subtle, a word that won't come, a sentence that disappears halfway through, a pause where speech once flowed effortlessly, then it progresses. And there is currently no cure. For Wendy Williams, the diagnosis carried a painful irony. Her entire life had been built around her voice. For more than 30 years, she had talked faster, louder, and more boldly than almost anyone else in media. And now the very ability that made her famous was being taken away. Not by critics, not by a television network, but by her own brain. Her team emphasized that she still had her sense of humor and could still manage many daily activities. Those statements were meant to reassure fans, but they also carried the quiet language of loss. That same month, a 4-part documentary aired on Lifetime called Where is Wendy Williams? The project had been filmed over 2 years, capturing her life during the period after her television show ended. For the first time, the public saw moments that had previously been hidden. The cameras recorded scenes showing Wendy struggling emotionally and cognitively. At times, she appeared confused. At other times, she seemed frustrated or overwhelmed. Some moments were deeply uncomfortable to watch. Her guardian later argued those moments should never have been broadcast at all. Attorney Sabrina Morrissey filed legal action against the production companies behind the documentary, claiming the series exploited a vulnerable person for profit. According to the lawsuit, Wendy may not have been capable of properly consenting to the filming. The complaint described the documentary as cruel and demeaning, suggesting it prioritized public curiosity over the dignity of its subject. But Wendy herself expressed a different perspective. She reportedly said she wanted the world to see the truth, even if that truth was painful, even if it showed her struggling. For Wendy, transparency had always mattered more than silence. In many ways, it was the most Wendy Williams decision imaginable. Even while facing a disease that threatened her ability to communicate, she still chose visibility over disappearing completely. Then, in March 2025, something unexpected happened. Wendy called into the talk show, The View. The call was live and unannounced. Her voice sounded different, slightly slower, but unmistakably hers. During the conversation, she pushed back strongly against the guardianship controlling her life. She told the hosts she was not incapacitated. She reminded viewers that she was a globally recognized figure who had been making major decisions throughout her entire career. Then she delivered a line that immediately spread across the internet. She said the court and the Guardian needed to "get off my neck." The reaction online was intense. Some viewers saw a woman bravely fighting for control of her life. Others believed she seemed distressed and possibly unable to fully understand the legal battle surrounding her. Most people felt both reactions at the same time, and that complicated mix of emotions was probably the closest reflection of reality. Then in November 2025, new medical information emerged that complicated the story even further. Independent neurological testing conducted in New York suggested something surprising. The report described what doctors called remarkable neurological resilience. Since achieving long-term sobriety, some symptoms appeared to have stabilized more than expected. Because of this, parts of the original dementia diagnosis began to face new scrutiny. Her legal team quickly prepared to challenge the guardianship in court. If the new evidence holds up, it could change everything. Whether the court will accept the challenge remains uncertain. But one thing has always been clear about Wendy Williams. She doesn't stop fighting easily. There is a quiet kind of courage that rarely gets applause. It doesn't arrive with dramatic music or heroic speeches. It appears on ordinary mornings when someone has every reason to give up, and they choose not to. Wendy Williams has been making that choice for a very long time. She made it as a child who constantly felt judged for being too tall, too loud, and too different. She made it after a first marriage that collapsed in just 5 months. She made it during the dark years of addiction while still building a public career. She made it after being fired from Hot 97, rebuilding her reputation in Philadelphia before returning to New York stronger than before. She made it during a 20-year marriage that eventually ended in betrayal and divorce. She made it while battling Graves' disease and lymphedema, conditions that pushed her body to its limits while she continued performing daily television. She made it after losing her show without a farewell episode. No grand goodbye, no final speech. One day the chair was simply filled by someone else. And still she kept going. Now she continues that fight through a diagnosis affecting the very instrument that made her famous, her voice. Through a guardianship she publicly challenges. Through a legal battle that could determine not just her future, but how similar cases might be handled for other public figures in the future. Especially for outspoken women navigating fame, health struggles, and systems that sometimes mistake vulnerability for incapacity. Because what Wendy Williams created was more than a talk show. It was permission. Long before social media gave everyone a platform, Wendy was already saying exactly what she thought to millions of listeners every day. She proved that an outspoken Black woman could sit at the center of pop culture and control the conversation without softening her personality to make others comfortable. She challenged celebrities. She questioned power. She blurred the line between gossip and journalism in a way that permanently changed entertainment media. And her impact still exists today. Her star remains on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Her name marks a street in the New Jersey town where she once felt out of place. Her voice is preserved in the Radio Hall of Fame, alongside the broadcasters she listened to as a child with a transistor radio pressed to her ear. None of that disappears because illness arrived. None of it is erased by a guardianship or a court case. If anything, the battle she is fighting now may be the most Wendy Williams moment of her life. She has always been most determined when the odds were against her, and recent neurological evaluations have given her supporters something they have been hoping for. Evidence that the brain, when given time, stability, and sobriety, can sometimes show resilience that doctors did not initially expect. Her legal team plans to present that evidence in court. The final outcome hasn't been written yet. But some parts of Wendy Williams' story are already permanent. She walked into rooms where she wasn't always welcome and made herself impossible to ignore. She told the truth in an industry that often survives on carefully crafted illusions. She loved her son with fierce devotion. She built an empire from nothing, lost pieces of it, rebuilt again, and kept moving forward. She was never perfect. She said things that upset people. She stayed in difficult situations longer than she should have, and sometimes reacted before healing from her own wounds. She was complicated, but she was always completely herself. And in a world that constantly pressures people to become quieter, safer, and more predictable, that kind of authenticity is rare. Wendy Williams is now 60 years old. She lives in a care facility in New York while continuing to fight for control of her own life.